Well, hey guys, welcome back to the shop. We are revisiting an old friend. This is a 200 ES we picked up back in December, I believe, of this year. We got it running. We did a wheel it run on it and it ran, and we found out, or we believe, that this actually could be an old relative of mine's bike. It was purchased about a mile from a relative's father's home, and he had one of these new back in '84. I can't prove it one way or the other, but we're going to go with that anyway because it makes for a good story. Now, originally, this had the front end on it that we've talked about many times that lock up, and they're just no good. And as you remember from this previous video, I'll put a link to it. Everybody points up in the corner, but then they never put the link there. I'll try to put a link there for this original video. And what I did is I welded on the bungs for all the original racks, so we can still have the racks and the headlight cage that this bike is famous for having. But what we're going to have is that this is a 200M front end. You'll recognize it as a 200M. It doesn't have the same, it's a lot like a 200S, but it's much wider. It's the perfect front end for a Big Red conversion. If you've got an 82, 83, or 84 Big Red, 200E or 200ES, this is a great front end. The 200M, they're plentiful. You can find them. They're not that expensive. You can buy the whole bike, a 200M, for a couple $100. Take the front end off of it, put it on your Big Red. You will thank me for it. Now, I know a lot of guys are going to go, well, man, if you're going to do all that, put the 200X. And you're right. The 200X is a better front end. But it doesn't make any sense to me anyways. If you found a 200X front end cheap, free, give to you, whatever, then use it by all means. But I wouldn't seek it out. And the reason being is it's still a hardtail. It's still going to ride very rough on the back end. Why have a luxury front end on the front if you're still going to feel every single bump in the back? So this is a 200X front end. This is a 200X bike. You see it has the much longer shocks on it, and so you have much more of a sport front end. I just feel that that's a waste, putting a sport front end on a utility bike, and that's what this is. So I'm trying not to lose sight of that. But when these front ends go out, when the factory Big Red front end quits working, they're never even. One always locks up a little lower than the other. It causes the bike to lean a little bit. You can weld them up, and you've seen me do that. We actually did a video on that, on just putting about a 1.5 inch lift on it, using the factory components, welding them up level and straight, and that worked out great. If you have a welder and you want to do that, that's a great option. But then you got a rigid front end, which is safer than a broken front end, but it's not going to ride any better. This is the best way to get, really, this is what Honda should have done. If you think about it, the 185S in '83 had a suspension front end on it. That should have went on the Big Red. The difference is, and the reason I don't suggest putting the 185 front end on here is because that requires you to run an 8-inch wheel. The 8-inch wheel is not going to match the rears, so then you're going to run two different size tires. You have 25-inch tall tires in the back, and you end up with a 22 in the front. Now, it's not the end of the world. There's a lot of guys that do that, and there's nothing wrong with it. And if you can pull that off, you know, and it makes sense for you financially, if you've got a busted 185S sitting around, put that front end on it and use it. But if you are really trying to build something that you're going to enjoy and something with it that matches and has the right look to it, this is the only way to fly. We're going to retain our racks. We're going to retain our headlight cage. This is still going to look exactly like it did in 1984 as a Big Red. It's going to have the 9-inch wheels on it. It's going to have the 25-inch tires on it. It's just going to look right, but we're all going to know deep down that it has a better front suspension on it. So this bike got sidelined for this problem right here. Needs that bearing right there. But we've got a lot of work to do still on this. That and a few other odds and ends. Pull cord, you know, we need to get a seat cover ordered. We need to sandblast the wheels, and we'll probably do that tonight. I've been putting that off. If I broke my sandblast cabinet, anybody look at this? Cookies, kidding, powder coat. I'm going to try my hand at that. We'll see. Not on this project. I probably need to practice a little bit, But we did get a new piece of glass for the sandblast cabinet. I just got it put in yesterday, so we can go back to doing some sandblast work. It's something that I've been down for a couple of months and haven't gotten straightened out. We've got a very nice match pair of tires. If you remember, rears, they still got the blue line on, check that out. They are not originals, but they are in good working order. They're good shape. And we've got a front floating around here somewhere, I think, that matches that. So we're gonna try to piece all this stuff together. I've got some fenders. I'm gonna have to climb up there in the steel. We've got some fenders way up there in the top. We're gonna grab them and we're gonna put them on here. We've got a rack for it. So we've got all the pieces. It's just a few small parts that are holding us up. It's been sitting on jack stands way too long. So let me put the camera down. I'm gonna grab some tools. I told you I got a new piece of glass. If you can get one of these secondhand, these cabinets are really great. You cannot fit a whole tire in here, unfortunately. You could have actually sandblasted this with the tire still on it if your sandblast cabinet was big enough. Mine is probably 4 years old and it's showing a lot of wear. It needs some work. I think I like the idea of making my own cabinet. I have rebuilt this gun 9 ways to Sunday. It is far from the way that they sent it originally. I've got my own pickup. It's there's not much Harbor Freight left except for the gloves and the cabinet itself, and really at this point those are my two limiting factors. I've got plenty of airflow. I'm moving a ton of media. As you see, I've got a 4-foot fluorescent light that goes all the way through. I just drilled a hole in the end of it and slid it in. Those are disposable at this point. They're so cheap. The glass was $20, I think, for the piece of glass. Now this is there is no plastic on this. This is tempered glass here, so it's actually got that laminate. It's like your windshield. If it were to break, it would just shatter. It would not come into shards. The glass that was here did break. It was single pane, and there was pieces everywhere. So please be careful about that. But this is what we started with. There's 2 wheels like that, and this is what we end up with. Now this is not Barrett Jackson here, y'all, but this is certainly a nice platform to paint on. It's got a nice even texture to it. We're going to take it one step further, and I'm going to take a flapper wheel sander. Y'all seen me use them before, and I'm going to go all the way around this perimeter here. This tire, this is what happens when you see this rust that's coming in here, in this flaky white stuff. That is that's Fix-A-Flat. Somebody's put Fix-A-Flat in here at some point in time, and it's fine to leave it. It's going to last another 20 years before you have any real issues with it. But yeah, this gives you a nice even surface to paint. And I've told you before, the 2 paints that I really use when I'm doing Honda Red, I like Sunrise Red. If you're in a spray can, Sunrise Red is really a nice red. It's close. If you look here, now this bike is dirty. It actually films pretty well. This is painted Sunrise Red. I did it. And this tank is not painted. This is the original red. That tank has not been painted. It's really, really close. It's not a perfect match, but Sunrise Red by Rust-Oleum is a good close red. As for the silver, you saw me use that on the little CT or ATC 70. I like Rust-Oleum they make an aluminum and they make a stainless steel. And sometimes, for whatever reason, Amazon runs out of one and they'll have the other. And so I'll step in and pick up the other one. But normally I like the aluminum. Just getting the light for you here. I like the aluminum and I like the stainless steel. They both have a nice silver finish without pretending to be chrome. I'm not trying to be chrome. I want silver. A good way to keep your floor from looking really ratty is get you an old cardboard box. This is a refrigerator box. A buddy of mine's in the refrigerator business. home stretch. So one of the things that really sidelined this bike for a lot longer than it should was the actual rear axle outer bearing that actually sits inside the brake housing on the right side of the bike. And so this was the problem. It cleaned up really good, but it is just locked up as tight as it can be. And so we're gonna change that bearing out today. We're gonna make it right. We're in there, we're gonna put brakes on it. There's no point, brakes are dirt cheap. They're like $23. There's no point going through all this and not putting brakes on it, not doing it right, putting a bearing on it. Once we get done with that, we're gonna pull the tank. I picked up some white vinegar, distilled vinegar. We're gonna let that tank soak for the next couple of days, and I hope by the end of this video, we'll be able to ride off. Tank looks good on the outside, but it's pretty rusty on the inside. It's just common. Metal tanks are gonna rust up. Sometimes, you know, you'll get lucky and it's just a small piece in the back. Sometimes the whole thing's rusted. As long as it's not rusted all the way through the tank, there's a strong possibility you can save it. The vinegar is a really inexpensive way to do it. You can kind of sneak that in with the family groceries, if you know what I mean. It takes about 2 gallons. I'll dilute the difference with water. It'll only take a cup or two more. Let that sit for 24 hours, 48 hours, depending on how bad your tank is. Come back. What I'll do is I'll pour half of it out and then put baking soda in it, which will neutralize the acid in it. Swish that around a little bit, pour that out, rinse it out with some diesel, works really well, or you can rinse it out with some gasoline too. I just wouldn't rinse it out with water. Water is your enemy on a gas tank. So rinse it out with some diesel or some gasoline, then put a new petcock in it, run you a good filter, you should be in good shape. If not, we'll pull a tank off the wall and we'll get riding with something. So let's take this bearing out. It takes a pair of snap ring pliers. I'm gonna look for mine. If I find them, great. If I don't, then we'll figure something out. Well, as you see, I did not find my snap ring pliers. This is a sealed bearing. This is a non-sealed bearing, if you're ever wondering what the difference is. If you go to Partzilla and look this part up, the original part number was discontinued and they upgraded it. They list a second part number. My understanding is this what's the difference. That's what the change was. Basically, they quit making an open carrier bearing like that and went to a sealed bearing. You can drive this in with a socket, which is preferable. You can tap it around a little bit. It's a pretty good press fit here. I'm gonna go get a socket that fits this size. If you don't have a big enough socket, you can use the old bearing, which is what we're gonna do. Whatever you use, try to make it the same size. So when you beat on it, the pressure is actually on the outer ring of the bearing and not the inner ring of the bearing. That's the biggest difference. Beating on the old bearing certainly ensures that it's the right size. We just need to hold it square. All right, we want to make sure that we get low enough that we can put our snap ring back in. Okay, I think we're there. Well, these can be tricky too. You just want to, I like to just kind of set one side in and then kind of walk it around. That seems to be the easiest way to do it. And that's it. And that's a $30 bearing. I'm ashamed to say that's what I paid for it, but that's what I paid for it. I just couldn't put it back together knowing that was in there. It would bother me, and it's just not worth that. Now we know this is right. The other side's bearing seems fine. This is the side that probably sees the most abuse. This is the brake side. I think this has more openings with your levers and everything that passes through this. Other side, of course, is more of a sealed up side. And you can see, it got some rust in there. I've cleaned it up. This has been in the parts washer trying to save that bearing. All right. But sometimes you find yourself, backed into a corner, and you got a deadline, and you got people that need videos, and sometimes you just have to move forward. So what I did, we did a video back last year about a really nice 84 that came in. It looked really good. Good plastic on it, and the motor just grenaded on me. We ended up fighting it for several days to put brakes on it. And so it had brand new brakes on it, never ridden on them. New bearing, $30 bearing. And we never got to ride that bike because while filming, that motor is running in the video, and as the video ends, within about 5 minutes of it running, letting it run, it just locks up, and it ate the timing chain. I've never seen one do that. Timing chain broke, timing chain went up, got caught in the cam, just a whole big mess. And so you end up with another parts bike, and that's one of the benefits of a parts bike. Both of these bikes were built in '84. It just depends on who owns them and how they treated them. Fighting with these posts that are locked in here, we would have to press them out. It's already been through a parts washer that got hot, and they're still not coming free. I just felt it was time to cut our losses. I'll pull that bearing back out. I'll reuse it. It's brand new. Haven't used it yet. And we'll put it in another bike. This one already has new bearings and new brakes on it, but I wanted to show you how to put brakes on here. Some of the things that get missed over a lot is this internal spring right here. Now you can live without it, and I'll tell you that because most of them break and they're not here. Out of all the bikes I've worked on, I would say less than half have the spring right here. And as you see, it goes around the actual cam for the brake shoes, and it helps retract the brake shoes off from the drum, pulls them back in, which makes it easier for your pedals and your lever to reset. You're not relying solely on additional spring. Now what a lot of guys will do, they'll run an external spring out here on the outside of the bike, and that's perfectly fine too. My understanding is they don't make this spring right here anymore. So if your bike has it, great. If your bike doesn't have it, there are workarounds. When these parts aren't made anymore, you do what you got to do, and that's all you can do. So what we have here, I kind of go ahead and assemble my brakes like this. I put the springs between them. You see here, okay? I lube up around the post. Sometimes I even put a little grease here on the cam. Remember, it's two pieces of metal that are sliding, so a little lubrication goes a long way. You'll take one side and get it set on like so. Now this is a good way to get your fingers pinched, so be careful here. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the post and the caliper and all of this to cam over and pull the brakes down. That's the left side, and then that's the right side. And it's just that simple. Now, I know I say that sometimes, and it's not just that simple, but that technique makes that a whole lot simpler than trying to put two together and then hook the spring and fight one side and then hook this. Go ahead and hook the springs together. If you can't muscle them apart, use the fixture that's given to you. Put half the shoe on one side, have it hold it like a handle, and then roll it over. That way you're always in control of where your springs are. And that's it. So what we're going to do is we're going to put a little sealant around the outside. That's your axle nut, your spacer or washer. That's your tension, really. That's how you apply tension to this. Now, a lot of times, and we'll go ahead and talk about it, a lot of times these hubs get a lot of play in the spline. And as you see, this one has a little bit of play in the spline. If you let that continue to get worse, you will eventually eat the entire spline, generally of the hub. Not so much of the axle because it's hardened, but you will waller out or strip the spline right out of your hubs. The way to prevent that is to always keep an eye on your hubs and make sure that this axle nut is tight. If you have a situation where you can't get the nut on there any further, like you've run out of threads or something, get another washer and space it out and keep your axle nut out here where you can get to it, okay? Don't weld the hubs on. That's a big no-no. I know a lot of guys do it, and yeah, it'll last forever probably, but when you need to put brakes on something or you need to remove the axle and service it, you can't do it. So it's a lot easier to put a washer on here, shim this a little bit, increase the tension than it is to break the welder out. It's not that big a deal. So pull your hub off. You've got two axle nuts here. one jams the other. That's what keeps them from tight. You have an actual shim there that goes in that order. Here we have a collar, which is a spacer. I'm not going to use this one because the parts that we harvest from the other bike already has it with it. This is our brake drum. This is the brake drum that came with this bike. I am going to put some grease on these splines. I'm not going to put it together dry. Try never to put spline components together without some type of grease or anti-seize or something to keep the rust at bay. I mean, you may never go in here again, but when and if you do, I promise you want it to come apart easily. That was really part of one of the problems with that other 84 was the splines were so rusted up that I ended up destroying the outer housing to get it apart. And you hate that. You know, it's nice. That's another reason to have parts bikes, but you know, you can't always rely on that. So anytime you're putting something together that has splines to it, always use a little bit of grease. Be sparingly with it. But what we have here, this is our brake drum. It slides on like so, locks into place. And then inside this one, you're not going to really be able to see it, is you have this spacer or sleeve is probably what it's called, and that's actually what the it spaces out for your brake housing here. Okay, so you see the one that's still in there. All right, that's why I'm not using that one. There we go. All right, so now what you have is really just reassembly. We've got our brake shoes on there. We're gonna have to get our posts and everything off that other bike as well. This bike did not have any brakes in it or on it when I got it. It really was a mess. It's, again, you know, a $200 marketplace three-wheeler. What do you expect, right? So we don't have a brake pedal on the foot pedal, so we're gonna have to get that off of another bike. But that's not gonna stop us from riding it. We can put around the yard with just front brakes, will be fine. Again, I'm just putting a little grease on these splines of the axle. Y'all haven't noticed there's a lot of birds in the shop, and that's because it's springtime. And we had an addition to the shop. We had a little nest built a couple weeks ago, and they have hatched. And so they are learning to fly, one three-wheeler at a time. They're hopping around here, practicing. So it's a pretty safe spot for them. You know, it's pretty locked up here. Not too many varmints can get in here and get them. So I don't mind it. They'll be gone in a couple of weeks, and I'll have to wait till next year to see them again. Some little hash marks, if you will, in the case, and they line up with the housing, so you know you're in the right spot and you're not out of phase with where these bolts are. They are all the same. They are 12 millimeter. Just don't over tighten them down. Remember, you're working with aluminum here. And I just check it periodically. I do need to find this longer bolt. The parts bike didn't have it, and neither did this one. But I don't think any of these are going to be long enough, so we'll have to find one. I know some of y'all aren't going to appreciate this, but some of you will. There is a right way and a wrong way to operate channel locks and a pipe wrench. And if you don't know, I'm going to tell you. If you do know, just, you know, let me tell the other new guys, you know, or girls. Not everybody knows this stuff. Not everybody's got somebody to teach them. When you're working with a pair of channel locks, what you want to do is when you push down, you want them to actually squeeze. When your channel lock is used properly, you can actually use it with one hand and only hold with one side. If you put tension on a pair of channel locks, they will hold themselves and they will actually get tighter by themselves. I'm barely holding any pressure here, but I'm spinning that axle with a lot of pressure. It's just the way they're made. If you had them turned the other way and you're trying to push down on them like that, they were trying to open up on you. And so you're losing some of your grip, you're rounding off your bolt. So pay attention to which direction that you're pushing or pulling with your channel locks. They work really a lot of the same way as a pipe wrench. Your pipe wrench will actually hold itself in place when you get it tensioned right. It's just sitting on there. I haven't adjusted anything. Sitting on there. Same principle. As you push down, it actually tightens the jaw. That's why the jaws can move around, so they can tighten up on one another. That makes them dig into whatever you've got them put on, whatever piece of pipe or tubing you're trying to turn. The same is said as if you're trying to push the opposite way. If you're trying to push on this wrench when it's upside down or the wrong way, it's just going to fall off because it doesn't have that looseness that makes it look like it's broke is actually what makes it work. So there, if you didn't know, then now you do. And I see it a lot of times on other videos and things. Guys that have crescent or channel locks, and they're just wrenching, and they're dragging the teeth across a bolt, and it's just grinding it down. You're never going to be able to put a wrench back on it. If you would turn it around and use it where it helps you, you're less likely to eat those bolts up, and they're less likely to slip on you. So there you go. Just thought I'd spread the word. I don't know everything, but I do know how to use a pair of channel locks. Our wrenches working opposing one another. There you go. Guaranteed not to come loose until it does. All right, so we got our hub on, we got our washer. We got to get some cotter pins. I am out of cotter pins. Again, you can put a little grease on here, wire wheel your studs. You know, these bikes are old. They've been sitting outside forever. Give them a little love, you know. It'll go a long way next time you want to pull this off. You won't have to fight it. You won't have to fight it once. And it doesn't take but a second. And grease is cheap, believe it or not. Considering how long it lasts, it's very cheap. And birds are having a fit. I think they're happy. We got a nice little home here for a little while. All right, I'll get the right wrench, you know I will. Big socket I got laying around here somewhere. But that's it. That's brakes on an 84. You do not have to pull the hub to do just brakes. This bike, I needed to pull the hub, and it was starting to look like a three-wheeler again. So now we're going to pull the tank, and we're going to pull the petcock out of it and plug that opening up, and we'll leave it on the table tonight. And we're just going to fill it up with the distilled vinegar. And like I said, what that is, that's an acid, and that will actually eat everything it touches that's metal and rusty on the inside of the tank. So be mindful of that. And if you're going to do this, you may not want to leave it unattended for much longer than a day or so. Check it at least every 24 hours. You can rinse it out with gasoline or diesel and then do it again. It'll keep working for probably 4 days or so before it kind of runs out of its kick. Okay, so we got our tank sitting on a towel here. Try not to scratch it up even though it's kind of rough. We don't want to make it any worse. When you pull your petcock out, this is probably what's going to happen to the majority of y'all, especially if it's an old bike. This is not all of it. There's actually a screen that is stuck inside, and it's really hard to tell if you look real close here. This outer gray or silver is actual metal of the tank, but the orange bronze color, you see that outer rim that goes all the way around, this kind of an orangey gold color, brown color, that is the plastic of the filter. And that's actually the first filter that your fuel comes in contact with. Now, this is how I do it. I use a drill bit, and so far, I've been very successful that way. It doesn't have to be real big. It just needs to be a good fit inside that screen. We're not trying to drill it out. What we're trying to do is grab hold of it. That'll work. All right, so what I do is I lean the tank over kind of on its side in case this goes out or goes bad. We hadn't hurt ourselves too much. All right, so what I've done is I've just kind of drilled into it. Now I'm going to slow down the drill and I'm going to pull the drill out. and as you see, this is the filter that came with it. And it's actually swollen on the inside, and now it doesn't want to come out. Normally they'll pull right out, but that was the other part, and that's the part you want to get out. I have done it that way 50 times, never had a problem. I don't ream it or drill it out. I just try to drill into it so I can get a good hold on it. And then once it does that, it will actually spin, and then I can pull it right out. But that's how you take the screen off. And that normally sits on here like that. So when you get a new petcock, that's how you assemble it. This is your first screen, and believe it or not, that's really a ton of filtration right there. What happens is guys that lose these, forget about them, they stick it in that way, and then you have no filtration. Now I'm gonna put this in the parts washer. I'm gonna try to reuse it and save it, but we'll see. If not, I can put another one on it. You can find these in the descriptions of the video. And believe it or not, I've had pretty good luck with the ones on Amazon. I'm not going to say they're as good, but they're pretty good, and probably 1 out of every 10 fail. That's not bad considering where they're coming from. And they're cheap. I think they're like $7. So it's cheap insurance. Go ahead, if you're going to be doing a tank, you may want to go ahead and buy a petcock before you ever get started, in the event that you can't save yours. They're not really so much rebuildable. As you see, they're riveted together, but you can certainly clean them out and blow them out with compressed air. And the filter, though, unfortunately, it really isn't. You can try to clean it, and as long as it's not torn, I think this one probably could be reused. I'm going to put it in the parts washer and see what we've got with, tomorrow. All right, so I got our tank turned up here. I took an old piece of fuel hose. I just plugged it up with a screw in the end of it, and I took it and I put it on the grinder just a little bit, just to give it a little bit of taper, so I could take it and I could work it in here by hand. We're just trying to seal it up from the water leak, and that's it. There you go. That should do it. Now, if you've got a metal table like me, it probably wouldn't be a bad idea to put a sheet pan or something underneath this, because this, if you leave for the night, you're going to come back in the next day, and this is going to be pooled up if there is any leaks in your tank, and it's going to eat your table. So if you've got a metal table, be mindful of that. Remember, this isn't acid. These gas tanks run about 2 gallons, 2.5, depending on the bike. They were bigger tanks, but I think these stock ones run about 2.5. All right, now when I get these set up, I want to include the cap also, because as you see, it's getting rust on it too. It's a good opportunity to go ahead and fill your tank up as high as you can comfortably get it, or as full as you can get it. You can even come back in here and shim up the front of the tank. A 1x4 would probably work really good. It wouldn't take much for it to sit real level. There you go, that's pretty level. And what I'm trying to say is, when you put your cap on, you want it to be submerged also. Okay. Any that you spill, be sure and get it off your tank. Okay, let that sit for a day, maybe 2. Come back and check it, slosh it around a little bit. You'll start seeing the rust break free, break loose. And this did not have big chunks of rust. Otherwise, we would have put some nuts and bolts in it and shook it up really, really good, and then did this. This really just had a nice, fine, even coat of rust. So I didn't feel it was any necessary to get in there and put the nuts and bolts in it. We're just going to let it sit, and we're going to let chemicals do their thing. Hey guys. All right, so we're back at it again. It's been the next day since we started letting our tank sit, or soak for that matter, in our white distilled vinegar. So we're going to open it up and kind of give you a sneak peek on it. I don't think it's ready yet, but I think it's really close. Now keep in mind when you do this, if you do fill it all the way up like I've done here, it will build up pressure and it will leak. And so that's just part of it. You can see the flakes of the rust floating in here. But if you look down in the tunnel, you can see how silver the tunnel is now, the tank, which it wasn't before. You can also see that the cap is now silver again, where it was rusty like it was here on the side. So I think it's going to take a little bit more. I'm going to slosh it around a little bit, kind of tumble it, if you will. And you see when I put the cap back on, it leaks back out. Be sure and get that off, depending on, you know, if you got an OE tank or not. I'd hate for your paint to come off. You can tape your tank up if you're concerned about the finish. Otherwise, you can leave the cap loose so it can off gas and not build up pressure inside the tank. All right, well, we got some more odds and ends to figure out. I gotta stop for a minute and clean up shop. I left it in a mess. So this is where we're at. We got the old 84 pulled out a little bit so I could clean it up. I got the battery charger on it, charging up the battery shot, but we'll use it as a jump pack nonetheless. We got a little bit of wiring to button up here around the headlight. I'm gonna see what we can find in way of a headlight. I'm gonna tell you that I'm struggling with the front fender, and that's probably gonna need to be another video by itself. I am working on an adapter to where we can adapt. This is a factory 200M front fender. See the 4 holes here on the top. I would like to adapt that to fit a traditional 200E or 200ES front fender. Reason being, a 200M fender is about $200. A 200 Big Red fender is about 50 bucks. So if we can come up with an adapter to adapt from the 4 hole to the 2 hole, then I think we can make it bolt on. But I think that's going to be a separate video just because I'm going to run out of time this week to finish that. But that is a project that I want to work on. Maybe give you some pointers on that. It really is a nice swap. We've got brake cables installed, levers installed. This came out of the boneyard here. These levers came off of a 110. You know, they're original OE style levers. I don't think they're the right design for the Big Red, but I don't think anybody's going to care at this point. I just like that they have a match set, and it does have a parking brake. Again, all factory pieces. If I can reuse a factory piece, I will, even if it is between the, you know, one model of a bike to another. I would still rather have an OE Honda part off a 110 than I would, say, an aftermarket lever that was too short or didn't have the right throw on it. It's nice having the old Honda parts. We did do a conversion on this bike. It does have a new CDI on it. It does run. It fired it up last night. It doesn't run really well, but it does run. So that's always a plus. It does have a Cobra exhaust on it. This bike came this way. There she is hiding under there. There you go. So let me get to it. Let me get some button up on some fenders and, or excuse me, on some wiring. Maybe we can get a headlight on it and take it for a rip. well, there we have it. That's pretty much phase 2 on this project. We're going to probably need one more video on it. We're going to tackle the adapter for the front fender. I spoke about that earlier in the video. Hopefully we can come up with some way to really, you know, adapt the 200M front end to use the less expensive fender. It's almost identical. It's only the way it hooks up is really the only difference. The way it bolts in is a little different. So chrome rack, I really didn't talk much about it. I had that actually came in on a Big Red, a parts bike. It's really rough, but it had a chrome rack. I mean, how often do you see those? You don't see them very often. The 200M in the back corner, we're going to be bringing it out pretty soon. It actually has chrome racks front and rear, but this was actually an upgrade from Honda. It's a Honda line accessory. It's kind of neat. I know it doesn't really tie in really well with the black front racks, and the black rack would probably have looked better. But give me some time. Let me think on it. If we can come up with some little bit nicer fenders, maybe we'll swap the rack out to a nice black rack and tie it all together. Bike still needs a few things really to really finish it off. Aside from the front fender, we need to get a seat cover for it, and you know, a few little small things like that. But she's a rider. You can ride it right now. It's come a long way. It's got brakes front and rear. We put a new bearing in the rear. We got it run in the Will It Run video, and we're just trying to kind of take it to the next level. We got new cables on our brakes, and so we're just building a solid, dependable bike. Whether you wanted to put it on the trail or use it around the house as a little tractor, they are really great. And I tell you, the 84. And I know there's a lot of 82s and 83s out there, and they have their place. But for me, the 84 will always be the quintessential Big Red. High, low, reverse, shaft driven. I mean, it's got everything, electric start. I mean, what more do you really want? With this modification of putting the 200M front end on it, it really does take it to the next level, to where I believe Honda should have made it originally. And I don't second guess Honda very often, but that front end that came on that thing was a disaster. So there we go. That's a wrap. This video went kind of long, but we had a lot to do. We covered a lot on this bike, and it's going to take probably one more video to really bring it back around. Original headlights, y'all. Original tail lights, still working to this day. But I think it turned out really good for what we set out to accomplish. We've got the racks on the front. It looks exactly like the Big Red should have looked or did look in 84. This really was the whole reason to do this, was to put these racks on, to use the factory mounting points, to use the factory racks. We didn't have to cut anything as in related to the racks. We didn't modify the racks in any way. If you wanted to pull these off and put another set on, they'd bolt right on. And that's how you do a modification. If you're going to modify something, it needs to work and look OE. So there you go. That's racks on a 200M front end on a 200 ES Big Red. As always, I appreciate it. Thanks for watching, subscribing, and we're going to pull this one out. I've got a lot of cleaning up to do. As you can tell, the floor behind me is a disaster. But got a lot of cleaning up to do, and I got to figure out what's going to be our next project. So if you got any ideas, if there's something you want to see, let me know. We've got a lot going on. We've got the 350X engine is tore down. We are waiting on a few more parts. We did get the piston in from Wiseco. We ended up going with the 82mm piston, which is the second overbore for that engine. Cylinder has to go out and be bored. When it comes back, we should be ready for reassembly on that bike. The 200M, I keep referring to it. We've got to get that bike back out. I don't think it's moved in over a year. So we need to do something with that bike. I wanted to get this Big Red finished up and get it off my jack stands. I needed my jack stands back, and this little bike had been holding them up. And I think we could probably even try to work on these fenders a little bit. Maybe we'll do some restoration work on those. These are original OE fenders. And with OE fenders, I know there's a big hole in this one. It's not that big. With OE fenders, we can put some heat on here and try to get some of that color back. So I'll show you how to do that in another video. We'll make an adapter on this front fender, and then we'll take this thing for a rip and we'll call it done. So until then, y'all take care, and I'll see you next week. So let me take a moment and just encourage you to get out in the shop, get you a small little project like this. Don't spend a bunch of money. See if you can fix it. Buy it cheap, set a budget, stay in your budget, and see what you can make happen. You'll surprise yourself. You'll come up with something and you'll be riding around the yard before you know it. So as always, thanks again. Thanks for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe. Y'all have a good day.